Welcome to the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast, episode number 24. I guess people used to think Deepthroat was a criminal, but now they think he's a hero. W. Mark Felt, the real Deepthroat.
Broadcasting from a dark, windowless room in Hollywood, when we really should be working on that next draft. It's the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast, showing you the craft and business of screenwriting while teaching you how to make your screenplay bulletproof. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to a very special Cloak and Dagger edition of the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, unlike other script coverage services, Bulletproof Script Coverage actually focuses on the kind of project you are and the goals of the project you are. So we actually break it down by three categories: micro budget, indie film market, and studio film. There's no reason to get coverage from a reader that's used to reading tentpole movies when your movie is going to be done for $100,000. And we wanted to focus on that at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Our readers have worked with Marvel Studios, CAA, WME, NBC, HBO, Disney, Scott Free, Warner Brothers, The Blacklist, and many, many more. So if you need your screenplay or TV script covered by professional readers, head on over to covermyscreenplay.com. Now, I've been wanting to do a show like this for a long time, and I finally have found a brave soul to do it. I always wanted to know what was the inside scoop, the behind the scenes kind of politics that go on at studios with script readers and development executives, and what are the politics, what are the reasons why scripts go through and they don't go through. What are some tips for screenwriters to get those screenplays through those first gatekeeping script readers? And I got that guy today. We will refer to him as Deepthroat. Now, I know calling him Deepthroat is a bit on the nose, but, in order for him to be completely honest, completely truthful, and share with us all the dark kind of secrets behind the scenes, he wanted to remain anonymous, and both of us agreed that that would be the best way to get this information out into the world. Now, Deepthroat is a working screenwriter. He has worked in major studios, on television, and in feature films. He is a sought-after script doctor who has worked on some big studio releases, tentpole stuff that you might know, and he happens to be one of my amazing script coverage specialists working at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, the information you're about to hear is very unique. I have not heard a lot of the stuff that we talked about in this interview. He was completely honest, fully transparent, fully truthful about his experience behind the scenes working in Hollywood, and it is an eye-opening interview, to say the least. So without any further ado, please enjoy my revealing conversation with Deepthroat. I'd like to welcome you to a very special episode of the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast today, because today we have an unknown script reader by the name of Deepthroat. I wanted to bring in Deepthroat to give him complete anonymity to say whatever he wants. Did I say that right?
Something like that. Something like that.
English is my second language. So I wanted to have someone to come on and be free to talk about everything that goes on behind the scenes in regards to script coverage, script reading, working with the studio's development, all that kind of stuff. And Deepthroat is definitely that guy. So welcome to the show, Deepthroat.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. The freedom that I have right now is dangerous and exciting. I love it.
It is great. It is great.
I am very excited to give you all the dirt on anything that you'd like.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So, all right, first of all, how did you, and again, all these questions we'll have to watch ourselves, but how did you get started in the business, as much as you can say, so people can find out a little bit about your background?
Okay, cool. So back in the day, once upon a time. No,
back in the 90s.
Yeah, right. So I went to college for creative writing. Loved it. While I was there, I wrote a script that ended up winning actually I wrote 2 scripts that placed first and second in a writing competition. I ended up selling those 2 scripts to a no-name producer, husband and wife couple in Florida. Didn't have a manager, didn't have an agent, didn't understand what WGA minimum basics were at all. So they basically wrote me a check and said goodbye. And I said, thank you very much. And instead of going to law school, I packed my car full of my crap, put my dog in the front seat, and drove to Los Angeles, where I used that money to get an apartment and eat for like 4 months because it wasn't a whole lot of money and LA is expensive. And I managed then to intern at as many places as I could using my free time. Talent agencies, production companies, you name it. That was before you had to like claim school credit. So like people were looking for free work wherever they could take it. So I got my foot in the door at a lot of these places, mostly mom and pop shops, but also like big agencies as well. So I was on the front lines of like, and they all knew that I was creative writing, and they all like, I'd read a script and I'd give them feedback on it, whether it was for an actor or for a producer or for a director or whatever. I was able to give them notes, and they were like, this kid actually knows what he's talking about, so let's give him more work. And eventually that led to me going into development, and eventually that led to me getting my own work out there in some capacity. And then, reading for production companies and studios, giving them notes on their scripts, doing rewrites, etc. So that's kind of where we're at now. And I also got involved with a couple coverage services. Can I say those names?
I would say no. Let's hold those off. Let's keep the names off. But you are working with other coverage. You worked with coverage services.
Yes, and the goal there is to discover talent. You know what I mean? Like I have some pretty solid relationships in town now, and when I see these writers coming in who live in, for example purposes, Anchorage, Alaska, and they've got no idea what the film business is like, but they've got some writing talent. We hone that a little bit. I've got one client I've worked with for a year and a half, and she's, last year she was a semifinalist in the Nichols competition. You know what I mean? And she didn't have any writing experience. Her first draft looked like a transcript of a show. You know what I mean? Or you know how you can download those transcripts? Yeah. Like that's what she was going off of, and that's what she thought it was supposed to look like. And then, a year and a half later, she's now, in the process of being repped, and she's talking to producers about her script, and it's wonderful to see. So,
and you also worked at development a bit.
Yes, I did.
What's that process like?
So I worked in that's a great question. So I worked at several different levels, right? Intern, assistant, development, coordinator, etc. And I actually at one point started my own production company with a couple buddies, and I was an active CE of that company. So, and we acquired a couple scripts, and it was good. And then we all had creative differences as can be expected, and we went different ways.
No way.
I know, right?
It's very difficult to hear that. Everyone works so well together here in Hollywood.
Everybody does. Everybody wants to be so friendly, and we just want to get stuff made.
It's nothing to do with ego. Nothing.
Yeah, and money has nothing to do with it either.
Exactly.
So the process was, when I was an intern, it was like, here's some scripts from writers that we already represent or movies that we've already purchased. Like, why don't you write up some coverage on me in this latest draft, and we'll see where that goes. So that would be basically what it was, right? So I'd write coverages for scripts that they had already acquired, that they were currently developing, meaning like they were taking it, they wanted to make this movie. They had either a pitch that went well, or they had an internal idea that they then went and hired a writer for, and this writer's now writing the script. And it's like there are various stages. You get X amount of drafts, and then the ideal thing is you make the movie, right? So from an intern standpoint, it was like, okay, I don't know what the purpose of this is, but sure, I'll read it. I'll give you notes. And then eventually I found out that the purpose was like, they were testing me, right? Like, do your notes match up with my notes? Do we think alike? Do you have an understanding of what structure and character development and pacing and dialogue, like, do you understand the concepts of what actual screenwriting is and what actual development work entails? And finally, when I had written enough coverages, they hired me as a development assistant, in which case I was paired with a specific producer who found my notes especially useful. And then that went from, here's project that we've already acquired, to projects that we potentially could acquire. Or here's a book that we're thinking of that's going to be released in 2 months. Like, read the book. Is there a movie there? If so, what kind of movie, what do you think, you pitch it so that then we can pitch it to a writer as an open assignment, right? Mm-hmm. So that happened a couple times. And then when I started working as a development coordinator, it's like, okay, now we have a list of projects in development, and it's like, this one's furthest along, so now we're acquiring talent, or we're looking for a director, or this script's out for investment opportunity, blah, blah, blah. So when you get to the coordinator, it's sort of more of like project management status, right? You're giving notes on projects, sure, but it's more of like, let's keep things on track for where they're supposed to be at X amount of time, right? Mm-hmm. Because as we know, time is money, and every time we do a draft, that costs money. We got to take time to rep the project, et cetera. So then when you get to the CE level, it's about, what do we want to be as a company? Do we want to specialize in sub 1.2 million? Do we want to go the low budget route? Do we want to go medium budget route where we co-produce, which would look, 2 to 12 million, depending on who we co-produce it with. And then past that, it's like, do we want to be somebody who gets a first look deal with the studio? We're making studio quality movies, whether that be indie or, the Suicide Squads of the world,
Yes. Good example.
So that's sort of the spectrum of the development ladder, and I'm sure that there are people out there with different experiences. That's just speaking from my own. Mm-hmm. And if there's one thing that I want to tell other people who are aspiring to be developers or readers or whatever, it's done several different ways at several different companies. That's why there are different companies. You know what I mean? That's why there are different companies that make better movies than others, or there's why some people specialize in making horror movies as opposed to the Black Panthers of the world. You know what I mean? That's two different styles of readers. That's two different styles of writing, and that's two different styles of development. So each one, I will say to that though, that I've sat down at multiple companies as an intern. Like I said, when I first got out there, I did everything I possibly could, right? There were a number of and I'm not promoting this book by any means, but there were a number of companies that basically slapped down the book, Save the Cat, and they were like, go read this, and then we can talk. And it's like, okay, do I need to read it again? But like, that's why I feel like a lot of these movies nowadays are so formulaic, right? But it's paint by numbers almost, that doesn't mean that it's easy and that people do it well. Mm-hmm. But there is, you can watch pretty much any movie, and the inciting incident is going to have between 10 and 15 minutes. And the first act break is going to have between 25 and 30 minutes of the movie. It's just, that's how movies are made. Audiences have been conditioned to view like that. So you kind of have to write and develop a movie that speaks to that,
At that budget, at those huge studio levels, absolutely.
Of course.
Yes. Even when you're in the indie world, even some of the most successful indies follow it in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And too, like the indie market, like that's where the art is made. You know what I mean? Like let's not kid ourselves. Like yes, we see a lot of these huge budget movies that are really well done and really great movies, and they gross a lot of money. But a lot of it has to do with spectacle, and a lot of it, and story often and art often becomes secondary to revenue and profit and other things that that tentpole movies are sort of built on. You know what I mean?
So when you were doing when you were in development, can you tell me a story that you were just like, I can't believe I am witnessing this? as much as you can give away without actually giving everything away. You can be a little bit broad about it.
This is actually a really good cautionary tale because I'm still sore about it, and
I can tell. I can hear it in your voice.
So this is going to be funny, and I have another one too. So
go for it.
So I'll start with the one that's not about me. How about that? So I read this book, right? I read this book. I was a development assistant. I was in the office every day at like 7:30. My boss didn't show up till 10:30, and I was sitting there reading when he got there. Even calling it a he, I hope that doesn't like reveal me.
Sure.
But anyway, so I read this book, and he always told me, he was like, if you see something that we could acquire, like make sure you tell me about it. Like make sure you bring it to my attention. I'm like, okay, sweet, like for sure. So I'm about 30 pages into this 900-page book, and I'm like, I run into his office, and I'm like, dude, there's so much here. Like,
it's Harry Potter, isn't it? Just tell me if it's Harry Potter. It's Harry Potter. It's Harry Potter.
I discovered Harry Potter. No, so he was like, oh, great. Like, I finish it and write up the coverage. And I'm like, no, you should probably start reading this now. He's like, oh, yeah, cool. And I was like, dude, you told me if there's something on the line not to wait. And he was like, okay, all right, well, I'll see what you got. So I spent hours and hours. I read this book. I didn't sleep for 3 days getting through this book. I wrote up 11 pages of coverage, which obviously young, obnoxious, too long, did not read type of shit, right? So I send it to him and I'm like, boom. It was like 2 days later, 3 days later maybe. And I'm like, all right, I sent it to you. Like, and he's like, okay, good, cool. I'll read it over the weekend. So a week goes by. Don't hear a damn thing. Another week goes by. What happens that following Friday? Mm-hmm. The book was optioned for $1.7 million by Warner Brothers, and it was currently being adapted by a writer who had just come off an Oscar win. And I'm like,
I told you.
And all the dude wrote me back was good instincts, period. That's it. That's all the acknowledgement I got. Good. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, so all these production companies are out there looking for like the next great piece of material, but it's also worth understanding too, from a writer standpoint, like they're just inundated. You know what I mean? Like he had scripts that were towering, 7-8 stacks that were taller than I was, that he had yet to read, Yeah. And it's just like good projects slip through the cracks. Taste is often an issue. Art is subjective. So it's like if you get 1,500 no's, all you need is one yes. You know what I mean? Like you could be that diamond in the rough. It's just a matter of somebody seeing it. You know what I mean? And it was just disappointing that could have been like, hey, this guy found this great project and, we're going to make a whole bunch of money off of it and good for him. Now let's promote him. Now let's give him a producer credit and blah, 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 blah. That never happened. I'm curious to know what my path would have been like had he been like, oh yeah, I'm going to read that tomorrow, reads it and is like, oh, dang, like this kid, he's right. You know what I mean? Like, let's go buy this. Let's go. And they didn't have a $1.7 million, but hey, if they'd have gotten it and presumably had, it's not like that deal happened overnight. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And in hindsight, it's like that deal was probably being negotiated well before I was even given the book. So you have to take that into account too. But it's just a matter of like things. It's like sit around and wait and then sprint, and then sit around and wait and then sprint. And that's kind of like the business, you know what I mean? And it's very much a hurry up and wait kind of deal. So, I would say to a lot of these young writers, like be patient, you know what I mean? Because when it happens, it's going to happen really freaking fast.
And what's the second story?
So the second story is different company, different company, bigger company. It was a manager / production company, right? So they repped writers, they repped actors, they did a lot of packaging in-house, they got a lot of movies made, and they repped some pretty awesome people. So I felt blessed to work there, right? And they had this really cool thing where they would bring us all in and we'd get to talk to the executives for lunch, and like they really made it so that like we met people, you know what I mean? So we got to know the people that we were working with and working for, which is really cool. One of them happened to be a manager that I really liked, and we bonded over fantasy football.
Obviously.
And my script that I wrote, it was a pilot. I was like, hey, it's a sports related drama. He liked sports. So I was like, hey, would you be interested in reading this? And he was like, hell yeah, I'll read it, blah, blah, blah. And he actually did, which was awesome. You know what I mean? After he read it, he came back the next week and he was like, hey man, I'm going to need you to sign the submission, like our submission agreement, because it's technically unsolicited material and, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, all right, yeah, cool. Like, what's the worst it can do? I mean, I work here, right? Blah, whatever. So then I sign it and I don't think anything of it. And then
I can see where this is going.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaker, dude. And let's just say my script ended up being the company's, that they then shifted so that there wasn't any legal issues to a different sport and it was a 1 hour drama and they put it into not a 1 hour drama. And let's just say it made it.
And it was your story.
It was my story.
So there's a lot of people out there that always are concerned, especially young writers, about they're going to steal my idea. They're going to steal my story. And then I've always heard that, like, look, professionals, don't worry about these kind of things because you'll get sued. But that's a perfect example of them taking it, twisting it a bit, and all of a sudden they've got it. So in your opinion, is thievery a major issue?
No, I think it was one guy who I trusted when I maybe shouldn't have. I'll say this too. He no longer works there. Shocker. I'm sure that's not the first sleazy thing that he's done. So it's a person by person basis, right?
Right.
Are you a good judge of talent? Are you a good judge of character? Those are the two things that really come up in this business. You know what I mean? So because there's a lot of sleazy people out there. Yes. But I would say that it's a 1 in 1,000 chance that somebody's going to steal your project. So I would say in the big scheme of things, register it. If you want to spend the extra money, get the copyright from the Library of Congress.
It's $35, yeah.
But you know what? Don't worry about it as much as, like, I'm the exception, not the rule. You know what I mean? So while I do have some horror stories, right, it also gave me the fact that, like, it was a learning. It was my script wouldn't have gotten made. You know what I mean? Like, I'll say that right now. They turned it into what it needed to be. I just wish they would have done it with me as opposed to not, which is again, I had written the script largely on company computers with company resources. It was theirs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because of those laws. And it's just like having an understanding of what intellectual property law is different than writing a spec script in your basement and sending it out to people. Like, it's completely different. You know what I mean? Like, Don't worry about submitting your script to contests that somebody's going to rip you off. It's not going to happen. You know what I mean? And if so, you have your receipt, you have the person probably who read it, if it becomes that, at least the company does. Mm-hmm. I would just say that it's again, I'm the exception, not the rule. And while that is a terrible story, it's rare if ever happens, and it's just my luck that it happened to me. So, and that's where I would end it. You know what I mean?
Well, but I also heard the mythical story of how when Tim Burton was working at Disney, he drew Jack Skellington and a bunch of the characters from Nightmare Before Christmas and threw them away in the trash can. Someone picked it up
and said, these are great.
And he put them away. And from that point on, it was owned by Disney because he signed the contract that said anything they create while they're on company time is theirs.
And the same thing works where I work now. It's the same situation, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know, should I even say what I do now?
No.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. So it's the same way, right? So if I develop something on, like, I'm even scared because of that process to, like, bring my personal computer in and use the Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? Because they could, even though I'm doing it on my computer, I may not even be working at that time, but I'm still using technically their resources because they're the ones paying for the Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? So it's like,
it gets that crazy.
You know what I mean? So it's like, if you're going to be working at a company, like a production company, and you're going to be one of these low-level employees with thoughts of, like, I'm going to get my work out there, just be cautious. Just understand the game. You know what I mean? Don't do it on your company computer, which at this point sounds like common sense, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't 5-7 years ago,
right.
So I wasn't even thinking that would be a thing. But it was a learning process, and I've since sold other things, and I'm not, it's not like my dreams were shattered. It's not like my swan song that I was getting out there. It's like,
well, one thing I find fascinating about your story in general is that you're a script. You also do obviously script writing or script reading and script coverage, which we're going to get into. But you're also a successful screenwriter. You've actually sold material. You've developed material. You're not just a script reader or a script someone who does script coverage, which I think is an assumption that a lot of people, especially screenwriters, young screenwriters, think that the script coverage guys are all, 18.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is some truth to that.
There is. So
again, I'm the exception to the rule, right? So I've actually been in talks with, actually we'll talk about that when you and I are off the air.
Sure.
But so there are sites out there, you know what I mean, that do have working writers. But to be perfectly honest with you, you don't want to get the coverage notes that you're going to get from a working writer necessarily all the time, because those aren't the people that are going to be reading your material at the production companies. You know what I mean? The first line of defense at any production company is the interns, is the development assistants. So if you're writing for the people who are actual writers, you're going to get a vastly different perspective on what the material should be versus what the 18 to 24-year-old fresh out of college doesn't have a effing clue about what good writing is and is just hoping to maybe become a producer or a low-level employee at this company that they're working for. Those are the people that are reading your scripts. You know what I mean?
So let's go. Let's go real quick. Let's back it up for a second. Let's go through the process of getting coverage. Like, can you explain to the audience what the process is completely from soup to nuts so they can get a better idea?
Yeah. So are we talking from like a coverage site, or are we talking coverage from a development company?
I'm going to go development company because, I mean, when you go to a coverage site like my coverage site or something like that, you're working with readers, and you're getting notes from your, and trying to help the writer move forward with their process in one way, shape, or form. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but now when you're sending it to a development company, production company, I would rather get that workflow involved because I think that's a little bit more behind the curtains.
Yeah. It's I agree with you. So the big hurdle that you have to get over is getting it there in the first place. Because a lot of these companies, it's not like you can call them up and be like, hey, I have this script. Do you want to read it? Because they're not even going to answer your call. You know what I mean? You got to get past the gatekeeper. Right. If you send them to like the info@productioncompany.com email address, it's going to go straight to the trash. You're going to get a note that says, hey, we don't accept unsolicited material. By the way, please sign this. Your script is not going to be read. You're blah, blah, blah. You ended up in the trash. So get it. So the question should be first, how do you get there? Right. Mm-hmm. And you get there by having a friend who possibly works there. You know what I mean? Which means, there's a lot of writers out there who are like, oh, I don't have to live in LA. If you're an aspiring writer, chances are you do have to go out there at some point. You know what I mean?
You have to do your time. You have to do your time.
Yeah. Everybody has to. You know what I mean? Go live, go get coffee, go grind it out. That's why I interned. You know what I mean? Because I got to know these people who could then get my script into places without me needing representation. Now, the other side of that is if you have a manager or you have an agent that can pick up the phone and be like, hey, Steven Spielberg, do you want to read the script? Oh, yeah, thanks, John. Blah. And then you get it in, right? Right? So there's that side of the coin, too. For people who are looking to get, to break into the industry, that one's more rare than the other side of the coin, right? Mm-hmm. So to pull the curtain back a little bit, you have to understand the level of fear that these development interns, development assistants have.
Well, just generally the business in general is fearful.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and yes, absolutely. And I think the higher you get up, the higher the stakes are. But those people are already making, presumably, a decent amount of money. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's the people who are making $450 a week who are there from 7 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night reading scripts, who want to put their neck out there because they want to get noticed and appreciated and promoted, et cetera. They want to get to that next level. But it's like you get one chance to submit your script and impress a producer. It's the same with being an intern or an assistant. If you bring them garbage, they're going to think of you as a person who enjoys garbage. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So the level of fear at these places, and this is why you get 1,500 no's, is because you have to find the person who's got the stones or the guts. I should say
cojones.
Right. to be like, hey, boss person, I think I found a really good script and I think you should read it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because they got one shot. So as much as the writer has the one shot, the script reader has the one shot.
Exactly.
With that company.
I think as writers, we forget that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Especially aspiring writers, because it's not just your career that's in jeopardy here. You start at the entry level. Your entry level script goes to the entry level person. Now, do you think Jonathan Nolan's scripts go to the entry level person? You got to be out of your damn mind. All he has to do is pick up the phone and say, hey,
it's Jonathan Nolan.
Yeah, it's Jonathan. If you want to read my script, and it's like, we'll buy it. Like page one title. Okay, great. It's got a title page. This is probably gold. Let's buy it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, so that's a completely different scenario. But the people who aren't the Jonathan Nolans of the world, and the people who maybe are like second and third tier Jonathan Nolans even, they go straight to the development assistants first, and I think that is something to understand as a level of fear and hesitation there. So they're always looking to find what's wrong with your script. I worked for a boss once who told me to read a script till its third mistake and then throw it in the trash. So that could have been grammar, that could have been spelling, that could have been formatting, which is a big one, because if you don't know how to format a script, you don't understand what a script is. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it was like read the script to the third mistake, and if it's in the first 10 pages, throw it away. You know what I mean? If you get past 30 and then you get it and it's like you're already invested in the story at that point, you might as well just finish it, Mm-hmm. But if they make 3 mistakes in the first 3 pages or the first 10 pages, people always say, like, it's your first 10 pages that sell. You know what I mean? If nobody's going to watch, if you're not hooked in the first 10 pages of a book or of a play or of a film or of a script, like, it's dying. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The same goes for us aspiring screenwriters. So it's like have to be sure that at least your first 30 pages are absolutely flawless. You know what I mean? And I'm not just talking story. I'm talking formatting, spelling.
Talk a little bit about that, because that is something that is unknown to, because I've read so many scripts that I'm like, dude, spell check, man.
Right? Like,
just format. I mean, it's final draft. You can format this. It's just not difficult anymore, guys.
You know what it is? Honestly, it's a pride in one's work.
Yeah.
And if you're asking somebody to take an hour to 3 hours out of their day to read your script, you better give them something that looks like you put a lot of effort into it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because if you're trying to get somebody to buy your stuff, but you can't spell the name of your main character right 4 or 5 times, why should we? You obviously didn't care. Why should we? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another thing that goes missed on people. So it's like, as when you pull back the curtain, those are the things that first stand out, right? The first thing that anybody's going to do when they read your script as a development assistant is flip to the back page and see how long it is.
Yep.
They're going to say, this is going to take me. So if you're submitting a 130-page script, they're going to put that on the bottom of the pile and go to the 90-page script, because in their eyes, it's like, oh, I can go tell my boss that I read 4 scripts today. So
Right.
I'm going to do the short ones first and save the long one for the weekend. You know what I mean? So again, something to acknowledge, right? Like,
now, but also, I also heard that sometimes you can lie and change the number count inside. So if you're like at 101, you could just omit numbers in the middle of the script to make it look like it's a 90-page script when it's actually really.
God, I've never heard of that.
You've never heard? I've seen that
Crazy.
happen.
That's hilarious.
Isn't that genius?
I've probably read scripts where I was just flying through it so fast that I didn't realize that there was 4-page 4.
They just skip a page and you just forget about it and all. But that way, I'm not suggesting anyone does that, but I've heard of it. So I didn't know if you ever. Apparently, it worked because you've never seen one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Which is an interesting thing, but also it's like it's pretty easy to tell when you've got a 90-page script sitting next to a 130-page script.
Well, there's only a handful of pages you could cut off with that technique.
Yeah, it's like
5-6 pages shave.
Like 101 to 109 is going to break you. You know what I mean? So if you're really hiding pages at that point, like yikes! Like I think you've got bigger problems.
You know, you're absolutely right. If you can't shave 8 pages off or 10 pages off your script, you're too close.
You know, and that's the thing. So my manager and my agents are very good about allowing me, especially in my early drafts, to write what I want to write.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, when we're about to go to market, they're very good about being like, listen, you're at 117 right now, which is fine, but like, go through the script again, take a couple days off, get drunk, you know, maybe smoke a joint, like do whatever it is that you need to do to get out of the writer mind frame and get into the reader mind frame, and think to yourself, like, this is your final draft, sure, but what absolutely doesn't have to be there? And undoubtedly I end up cutting 4 or 5 scenes, which brings it from a 117 to a 108 or a 104. You know what I mean? Because so it ends up being like, no, yes, I love this scene. Who is it? Ernest Hemingway that says, like, go back through, delete all your good lines, see if the story still works, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And it's like, it's so true. You know what I mean? Because we as writers, we like get attached to the certain things that as writers we love, but as like readers, it's like, okay, this is just more for them to get through to get to the next point. You know what I mean? And I hate to say that because that's where a lot of the art comes in. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I thought it was Hemingway or Mamet that said, writing is easy. All you have to do is sit at the typewriter and bleed.
That was a Hemingway quote.
That's Hemingway,
sure.
Yeah,
Exactly. And it's so true. You know what I mean? And you even bleed even more because he's also saying writing after all is rewriting. You know what I mean? So he's a big proponent of like, sure, bleed, but then go back and cut yourself open a few more times. So
paper cuts.
And when you don't die, that's the script of the story that you've got. You know what I mean?
It's quite brutal sometimes.
So I mean, you have to be really diligent because those are the types of things that as development assistants, if you go through and they see that you've got like 8 scenes that don't necessarily, like if you've got a savvy reader, you know, you're lucky, but you're also in a spot where it's like,
you better be on.
Your script better be on because this guy's going to be, or this girl's going to be, you know what I mean? So it's like, she's got a great perspective of what a good script is. So you better fit the mold. You know what I mean? And realize too, that like when you pull back the curtain, it's think I speak for every development or reader person, regardless if you're in, a major studio or a small production company. You're looking for reasons to say no.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like from the title page to the end of the script, you're looking for reasons to say no and protect your little area of comfortability that you've built at your internship or your development assistant job.
Or your
whatever.
job, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like you're looking for reasons to say no because no doesn't put you at risk. A yes is immediately when you like roll the dice at the craps table. You know what I mean? So I think and dude, I got to tell you, I read some fantastic scripts as well that like didn't fit in line with what our production company's mandate was at that time. You know what I mean? So even though we maybe had won an Oscar for a drama movie, we were focusing on low budget comedies. So while I've got this great script that I would love to recommend, because when you look at our IMDb page of scripts that we've done, it's like, that would definitely fit into the mold, but not our current mandate. You know what I mean? So like understanding what a production company's current mandate is and understanding that that's fluid and changing. Whereas like, most production companies, if you're horror, you're horror. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but like
you're Blumhouse, you're Blumhouse.
You can sort of have a mandate. It's like we're looking for female-led horrors, or we're looking for paranormal type of stuff, or Purge just did really great. Can we find our own Purge? You know what I mean? It's like they think like that. You know what I mean? Like they're trend followers. Writers like to think of themselves as trend setters. Where do you find the balance of fitting into what these production companies are trying to do moving forward into the future? And the truth is that a lot of them don't have a clue what they want.
Well, do you agree right now how many production companies around town are looking for the next crazy rich Asians?
Oh, I think
everyone, right? Everyone right now is looking for that script.
But 3 years ago, when that was going out to market, dude, nobody would have said yes to that.
Crickets.
You know what I mean? It's the same way with Stranger Things. I don't know. And this story might be wrong. I've only heard it secondhand, but they got like
rejected by everybody.
Every network in town.
Everybody.
Right? Netflix, they're like, we don't understand the tone. We don't understand the tone. Like, why are these kids like swearing and stuff like that? Like, we just don't. Is this adult show? It's a kid show? It's fantasy? It's reality?
Could not deal with it. They just couldn't deal with it. Yeah.
They couldn't wrap their heads around it. And now guess what they're doing? Everybody wants their own Stranger Things. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So, like, if you think if these companies, like, if you live in LA and you meet a producer at a bar and you're getting drunk next to the pool or something like that, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're looking for female-led crime thrillers that are 4-quadrant," and you're like,
"Yes,
okay, I've got one of those." You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, say yes, obviously. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have it, even if it doesn't fit all those bills, because they don't know what they want. They know what they think they want. And you have to convince them that what they think they want is actually what you have. You know what I mean?
Well, isn't it?
But again, there's just so many hurdles that you have to get through.
But there are those few producers and companies who are ahead of the curve, and I think 99% of the rest of the town is chasing the curve.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Because because the first ones through the wall are always bloodied.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too that like it's a great observation to make, because those are also the companies who may not be around in 5 years. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Because they were willing to take chances. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is like, why are we risking our comfortable bubble here to potentially be out of business in 5 years because we went and bought 3 scripts that we're not going to be able to get cast or financed or packaged or in front of in front of viewers. You know what I mean? So it's like, everybody wants to call themselves a producer. You know what I mean?
Oh, everyone's a producer. Everyone.
Yeah. And it's just like, it comes back to what my first story, which is, are you a good judge of character? Are you a good judge of talent? Mm-hmm. Pair yourself up with the people that you trust, that you work with, that you know. And before you start slinging your script around to like everybody and their mother, trying to get in front of as many people, it's not about a numbers game. It's about the right people. Because if you get it in front of the right people, like I've got a buddy that he's a very successful agent and he works at a very successful company. He came out a couple years after I did. I knew him through a friend. We've since become great friends, even though he read some of my – he actually read that script that I was talking about. He was one of the guys that read it, and he was like, dude, this is a fucking great script. Like, I want you to change this, that, and the other. And then all that shit went down, and it was like, dude, don't worry about it. Work on your next one. And he was very good about like he wasn't even my agent, and he was really good about like keeping me more like focused. You know what I mean? Like
right.
pieces. And he was like, dude, it's not going to be the only good thing you ever write. You know, it's just the first good thing you ever wrote. So keep writing and just know that this door is always open. And even if I say no, even if it's not for me, I'm not closing the door on you. And that's the type of people that writers should look for. You know what I mean? Because it's like, you build the bond first. Like, I didn't meet this guy knowing that he was going to become this great agent. I met this guy because, again, ironically, we bonded over football. He went to a big football school. I went to a big football school. My buddy, who I knew from high school, went to that school. We were rivals. We were at Barney's Beanery watching college football. I get introduced to this guy who's a low level intern at that point, and I'm like, dude, I like you. Let's hang out. Let's get beers. And we became friends. And as he climbed the ladder, so did I. And even to this day, if I wanted to fire my current agent, I'd know that I had an open door at his, because I know that I could send him stuff. And that's the type of people that you need to be looking for. It's not the numbers, it's the quality. It's quality, not quantity. So make the relationships with people. Keep those relationships up. I think if you come out here looking for money and looking to build a network and meet as many people as you possibly can to help you, you're going in with the wrong mentality. You know what I mean? Go in knowing that like you want to make this place a home. You want to make this business a home. You want to make these people your friends. And that's so rare to find in LA. And that's why so many people turn tail and run after 5-6 years, because they can't afford it. And they know that their yoga job isn't going to make them enough money to survive and raise kids, you know?
That'll be the Uber job. Every time I get into an Uber, I always go, how's the script going? I've actually done that a few times, and they go, how'd you know? Are you a producer? I'm like, no, I'm not a producer.
No, sorry. But I guarantee you, if you said that you were, they'd be like, oh, well, do you mind if I get your email address? It's like, that's not a relationship built on trust and integrity. That's a relationship built on wants and needs and unrealistic expectations.
That's just a great, that's a great way to put it. It really is. Because I always tell people, like, if you met someone at a party, you wouldn't just jam your script in their face.
Yeah.
You would meet them. You would introduce yourself. If you're a human, if you would introduce yourself and go, hey, how are you? And I always tell people, you always ask them what you can do. What can I do for you? How can I be of service to you? Yeah. And that's a great way to start a relationship and start building.
It truly is. And, you know, and even like, so even outside of that, you know what I mean? Where it's like, hey, we have something on common ground to bond over. You know what I mean? Maybe they're excited about going to see Crazy Rich Asians, and so are you. It's like, dude, let's go together. Right. You know what I mean? Let's go together. Let's go talk about, you know what I mean? Like, build a relationship up from the ground, just like you would if you were moving to, you know, Podunkville, wherever. You know what I mean? It's like, how are you going to meet people? You know what I mean? You're going to get involved in the community. You're going to do things that the community likes to do. You're going to find common ground. And maybe I have a different perspective because I moved around a lot as a kid. So whenever I'd go, it's like when I was going to a new place, it was like sports, it was clubs, it was, you know, community, you know, meetings, whether it be churches or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's how our family integrated in the community. And you have to go out with the mentality of like, I'm going to integrate into the community first. And you're going to find that, like, if you go out there with genuine intentions to, like, meet people instead of meet people that are going to help you, the perspective is, it may not seem like it, but the perspective is drastically different, and so are the results. You know?
Amen. Preach, sir. Preach.
Where are my candles at?
Now, as going back to being a script reader, what is the biggest mistake you see screenwriters make?
So I met a woman, changed my life, changed my perspective really on what it meant to be a writer. And granted, at this point, I'd already sold 2 scripts, blah, blah, blah. I'd, you know, got my creative writing degree. I got my MFA in screenwriting. I got all this stuff, right? And I went to the WGA, and this woman, I'm not going to say her name, she was giving a talk there, super successful. And she was like, you know, everybody around town is trying to come up with the next great idea when they should be coming up with the next great character. And that really spoke volumes to me.
That's deep, but yet simple.
It's so simple, right? And it's like I'm sitting there in the audience, and all of a sudden it's like, and light bulbs going off, and like I'm getting tingly feelings in my feet and my toes, and I'm like, oh my god, like she's so right. I mean, if you think about it, like Mad Men, great show, but it's a great character.
Breaking Bad, Sopranos,
Walter White, Sopranos, like all of these great shows, all of the even movies, like look at Little Miss Sunshine. Olive is a great character. You know what I mean? That's filled with great characters. William Wallace in Braveheart. Braveheart wouldn't be Braveheart without that character. You know what I mean? And I think
Indiana Jones, of course. Yeah,
Indiana Jones. Like it complete. And that's the biggest thing that I feel like writers don't understand is that they're trying to write for the spectacle and not for the character. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you can. I mean, I was about to say structure because they don't understand structure, and I think that's one of the most important things to learn, right? Mm-hmm. But really, when you come down to it, when you approach the premise or the idea that your structure comes later, right? Mm-hmm. From an idea standpoint, like if I don't care about your character or I don't know what they want or what they're after, you could have the most structured story in the world. It's not going to make sense because I need to know exactly who this character is,
motivations, right?
What their goals are, mm-hmm. why they're working towards it, and subconsciously, why do I give a shit? You know what I mean? And that I think is a lot of what, a lot of these scripts that I cover don't seem to understand because I've given the note. I mean, I could probably give this note on every single script that I see coming in from a first-time writer, which is decent story, it functions, but like, why do I care?
Right.
And I'm going to care when I care about the character. When you've created a good enough, well-rounded character. And I mean, that character could exist in a tentpole movie. It could exist in a micro-budget, $100,000 film. I don't care. That note applies to every single budget and genre that there is. If you don't care about the characters, if they're not making – so I call it the cha-cha-chas of storytelling, right? Mm-hmm. It's a character that is approached with challenges – and then in the end, they change. You know what I mean? And it's like those three simple things, the cha-cha-cha, character, challenges, changes. If their script isn't built on those three simple things, it's just not – I'm not going to care, Mm-hmm. And I think crafting a really solid character with clear motivations and a clear flaw that we can both sympathize with and root for, that's when magic starts to happen. Structure it any way you want at that point because at this point, I care about the character. I'll spend 20 pages in their normal world because I'm interested. You know what I mean?
I watched the last Indiana Jones film purely because of Indiana Jones.
Right.
The script was horrible.
Right. And you make these good characters and it creates its own franchise. You know what I mean? Like they call it, what is it? The Spielbergian way of crafting a character or introducing a character. Like he does it so wonderfully. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Paul Thomas Anderson, and I want to clarify, it's not that you have to like the main character. You have to be captivated by the main character. So, like, There Will Be Blood is a great example of that. First 7 minutes of that movie, the script is a little less, right? And if you look at the final draft of the script, like, it's different than what you see in the movie, but the premise of it is the same, right? Mm-hmm. It's this guy who is relentless and unbelievably motivated to get rich. You know what I mean? To the point where he drags himself, leg broken and all, to go turn in the little chunk of silver that he has to start his takeover of the world.
Right, I mean? Basically, like, yeah.
And I didn't I knew from like the instant that this guy was on screen, I was like, this guy is a maniac, but I can't take my eyes off of him. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And Daniel Day-Lewis did a great job, but even on the screen or even in the script, when you read it on the page, it's like, this is such a well-crafted character. You know what I mean? And to know the transformation, that I don't want to spoil it or anything, to know what that person goes throughout the script, it's like you don't have to like him to care about the movie. You know what I mean? And to care about what happens. So
right. Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. I mean,
exactly.
He's a psychopath, but whether you cannot take your eyes off of him. Or Jack Nicholson in The Departed. You just can't take your eyes off of him.
Yep. I mean, and that to me is like when I enter into a script, like I get really excited when I read a shitty script with a fantastic character because like they're miles and miles ahead of somebody who's got a good script with a bad character. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I mean, you can sell a bad script with a great character. You can't sell a decent script, a functional script with a bad character. It's just not going to happen.
Right. I mean, I just started watching The Americans for the first. Have you guys seen that show? Have you seen the show?
Graham Yost is probably my favorite writer ever. Him, and I really love Taylor Sheridan. I'm really into Taylor Sheridan right now, but like.
But this, I mean, we're literally in season 1, my wife and I, because it's the summer and our shows haven't started yet. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this is so well written. The characters are so well crafted. You hate, you love, they go back and they go forth. I'm like, we're 6-7 episodes in. I'm like, there's 6 seasons of this. I can't wait. Like, it's so well done but it begins with character. It always began with character, at least with this show and with most of those shows that are great. It's always character. And you're right. If you have a good character with a bad script, you could turn a bad script into a good script with some work.
I can work with that.
But to create a good character is much, much more difficult.
Like, so we just watched Justified.
Yeah.
My wife and I'd seen it before. She had, again, great character, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's say what you want about the show. I mean, I think it's a great show, but like, if you read Elmore Leonard's short story that it's based off of, that is all about character. You know what I mean? That translated well into the actual show. And obviously character is more, what do you say? Like, it's put on a higher pedestal when you're watching a TV show because it's built on characters, right? Like the stories, whatever. You're not supposed to end. The stories in television are all about keeping it going, right? Whereas a film, like, let's end it properly. You know?
Right.
So the reason we keep coming back, especially to like procedural shows like NCIS, for example, it's like we keep coming back because we love these DiNozzos, these Zivas, these, you know, like we just love these people. And it's like, it's pretty outstanding. And
yeah, I get you.
Character is God in my world.
So. No, absolutely. I mean, character and structure. I think those are the two things. Character first, and then you got to get that structure. You have to have a good clothes to put on the character, if you will.
Yeah. And I actually made a mistake earlier. The Americans is not by Graham Yost, but
no, it isn't. I forgot. It's
Joe Weisman.
Yes.
But they're very similar. You know what I mean? And especially in the way that they portray their characters. And I feel bad that I messed that up, but
it's all good. No one knows who you are, so it's fine.
That's true. Sorry, Graham. Sorry, Joe.
So in general, well, first of all, can you give us any tips on what would catch the attention of a script reader for that low level? I think we kind of touched on it, but is there any specific thing besides having a great character?
So, and I feel like a lot of it's just to make the reader's job easy. You know what I mean? So it's like and when you're reading a novel, like you can spend 6 pages describing the color of a lamp.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
In a script, you just say the lamp is yellow. And if it doesn't matter to the scene that the lamp is yellow, then get it the F out of there. You know what I mean? It's like, so one of the first things that I'll see on page 1, which is like, if it doesn't have to be there, it shouldn't be. And I can tell right away whether or not the reader or the writer is going to be showing us is going to be showing us the information rather than telling us, you know, and leaving enough room and acknowledging the fact that this is a collaborative endeavor. You know what I mean? Like you shouldn't direct the scene. You shouldn't have, you know, close up here. Like really good scripts describe those moments in a way that they don't have to sit there and tell you that you're reading a script. You know what I mean?
Dolly shot in.
Yeah. It's like, take that out. You know what I mean? Like, and you can tell right away. So that would be one thing that I would say is like, don't direct the script, don't direct the writers, understand formatting, grammar, spelling, take pride in your work, and then do a good job of making us care about your character in the first 3 pages. You know what I mean? Or at least make it interesting enough or fascinating enough to where we can't take our eyes off the script. And there's a trick that my manager actually taught me, which is if you know, it's not just about hooking them into the first couple pages, right? If you can hook them to the point where you leave something at the bottom of page 9 that makes them turn to the top of page 10, and then leaving something at the bottom of page 10 that forces them to turn the page, it's super hard, right? But once you start getting into the final drafts of your script, like it should flow like that. You know what I mean? To where it's like they can't stop turning the page, you know? But it's super it's very, very difficult to get on that microscopic level. But if you're submitting a script to a production company, you should have thought about those microscopic things. It's very easy to tell when a writer has or hasn't, as simply, grammar, spelling, formatting. You know what I mean? So make sure those are the things that right off the bat. And if you've got a 130-page script, like, I hope it comes with a 2-page treatment or something like that, because they're going to get too long, did not read. Or
unless Tarantino's name is on it.
Sorry, what?
Unless Tarantino's name is on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Jonathan Nolan's Dark Knight was like 152 pages or something like that?
But it's Jonathan Nolan and Chris Nolan, and it's okay.
And I get that a lot with new writers, and they're like, but so-and-so did it this way. It's like, yeah, but so-and-so made a shitload of money the last they made. So it's like, you're not so-and-so.
You're given, isn't it fair to say that you're given a lot of leeway in this business once you start making a lot of money?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
You could do.
And that's why I'll tell young writers too. It's like, go read scripts, right? And it's like, but I'm going to tell you right now, don't describe characters like they do. Don't format like they do. Don't do that kind of stuff, because they've earned the right to misspell their character's name. They've earned the right to have formatting errors. You know what I mean? They've earned that right. Mm-hmm. So you haven't. So you have to play by those rules before you either A, are too lazy to break them, mm-hmm. or to care, or you are established enough to where you can break them and break them well, So, right. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. It's like, don't compare yourself to successful writers just yet.
Oh God, I know.
I get that all the time. It's like,
I know.
It's like, okay, good Lord. I also hate when people use the word "we" in scripts, and I know a lot of people do it, especially professional writers and especially writer-director types. It's just like, it just reminds you that you're reading a script. You know what I mean?
When they say "we see this" or "we see that."
Yeah, and at the very basic level, what you're trying to do is you're trying to absorb the reader, especially a reader who doesn't really have a clue about screenwriting or storytelling. Like, you're supposed to absorb them into the story as much as possible. So your imprint on the script should be as minuscule and invisible as possible. And when you start bringing in we know you're a real person, and we know this is written by somebody. It's not just a story that we're, swimming around in. It's a script. And I think if you can make, like, Brian Duffield does a really good job of making you forget that you're reading a script. Have you read any of his scripts?
I have not read any scripts. Can you tell the audience who he is and what he's done?
Yeah, he just had a movie come out called The Babysitter.
Okay.
On Netflix.
Oh yeah, the one by McGee.
Yeah. He has so Brian Duffield, I think somebody told me this. Don't quote me on it. Don't tell me if it's right or wrong. I don't even really want to know, but I like telling the story that he sold more spec scripts or had more. He's one of the more successful spec writers over the last 5 or 10 years.
I think Esther House has that.
Yeah,
that credit.
Right? But it's like you read their script. It's you can find it online. Go. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. The Babysitter. It's okay. There it is. It's 93 pages. Mm-hmm. The first line is interior nurse's office day. Cole is 12 years old and losing his mind. That's the first line.
That's a good way to start.
So simple. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't have to overthink it. You don't have to over describe it. And I love Brian Duffield's writing because he lets you make the picture in your own head, just as if I had a writer once tell me that what you're writing is actor bait. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's so true, right? But it's also director bait. Yep. You know what I mean? So if you're over describing your scenes, that just takes away from the creative side that a director can, the creative imprint that a director could put onto this to the script, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, the less you can tell, the more leeway you can give to those other creative elements that are brought on to bring your script to life. Like, do it. You know what I mean? So, I think less is always more, and it's so difficult to get that to come across to people because they're like, what does that mean? And it's like, if it doesn't absolutely have to be there, don't let it be there. And Duffield is so good at it, and he's always properly formatting stuff. And even though he's an established writer, you can tell he doesn't shortchange the other 2 pages down, there's another wonderful description. Cole is waiting for the school bus besides Melanie, another 12-year-old, also his neighbor, also definitely not a potential love interest for Cole. So whoever told you that is an idiot and a liar and a loser, and then it interrupts the conversation with her dialogue. So it's like you're seeing it happen. You know what I mean? It has a voice. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, go read Brian Duffield's scripts. He's a fantastic writer as well. The guy deserves a lot more credit.
Now, let me ask you also, can we please just put out there in the universe that people stop using 75-cent words in screenplays? Yes. Is that a big no-no? They want to prove to you that they have a complete grasp of the English language and want to prove to you how smart they are by using words that no one has ever used in conversation. Again, it comes back to yes. Short answer to your question, absolutely. It again comes out to knowing who's reading your script, right? If you have to send a 19-year-old out to go get a dictionary, they're not going to give a shit. You know what I mean? So it's like, have you ever read the Alien script? Yeah, I love that script. Walter Hill. Dude, Walter Hill's amazing.
Like interior engine room, empty, cavernous. That's it.
You know, like straight up.
That's it. Like jammed with instruments, all of them idle. Console chairs for 2, empty. It's like, yes, that's what you need to be doing. Like, paint the picture, build it up. There's the patina of the walls can be smelled, and like no, dude, no. That's a book. That's a book. Exactly.
That's a book.
Know your medium. You know what I mean? And then like a lot of writers I see too, especially young writers, and I see a lot of this with writers who, and this always gets me where it's like on the title page it'll say written by, John Stevens. Based on a book by John Stevens. And I immediately go into it and I'm like, oh God, this is going to be rough. Because
created by John
from
Stevens.
A literary background, you know what I mean? A prose writing background. How is that going to translate? And sometimes I've been surprised. There have been a couple writers who have surprised me. But for the vast majority, it's like, yikes. You know what I mean? Like you're basically copying and pasting certain elements of description from your book into the script format and dialogue, etc. Like there was one writer who I could tell was copying and pasting dialogue directly from like his Microsoft Word document into the final draft document because a lot of the dialogue, like he forgot to delete the quotation marks at parts. So I'm like, oh, this is brutal. Or it would be like said eagerly. And I was just,
at the end of the dialogue,
dude. Oh man, alive. And I'm like, okay. So the note that I'll say about that is like, if you can't see it on the screen, it shouldn't be in the script. And there are exceptions to that, especially when like describing a character, for instance. Like I feel like you can do a little bit of editorializing in those moments to give a bigger shape to like who that person is, you know? Or like Shane Black had a really good one where it was like he's always really good at describing things, right? But he also has a voice, and at this point he was Shane Black. So he wrote something, I can't remember what it was. It was like a huge penthouse, the type I'm going to own when this fucking movie sells.
yeah, he does that. Yes. That is so like, Shane Black.
Introduce yourself. Like if you can inject yourself into the script in that way, that's different than what we were talking about earlier, which is like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I have heard of. I've heard of screenwriters. I've read screenplays that have that kind of stuff. Like they'll put a little note, like, and this is for the script reader, and blah blah blah. Like but they're at an established point. They're at an established point, and they can play with the medium a little bit. But Shane Black is a perfect example. You read Lethal Weapon. You read Kiss Me. Was it Gone? Kiss Me. Long Kiss Goodnight.
Yeah.
Any of those. I'm dying to see Predator. The Predator. I can't wait to see that. But he's amazing. And the way he writes, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. But he is that kind of writer. You're absolutely right. Yeah. He's like the Penthouse, like after I sell the script.
Exactly. Yeah. He's got a voice. You know what I mean? He's got a voice that doesn't interfere with the story. And in fact, it does the opposite, where it's like, I want to see what else this guy's got to say. Shit. You know what I mean?
Because if you have the balls to do that, and again, I wouldn't suggest a first-time screenwriter. I'm not telling
you to go out and write like Shane Black for sure. You know what
it's been done. It's been tried many times before and it failed. It's like when people try to look after Pulp Fiction came out. Forget everybody was trying to write Pulp
chapters.
Fiction.
Everybody's writing chapters.
Everybody was writing chapters. Everybody was trying to be. Yeah, that was that movie that came out. How to Die in Denver. What to do in Denver when you're dead. And there was like a bunch of rip-off Pulp Fiction movies. Right afterwards, Pulp Fiction.
Of course. And now there's going to be a whole bunch of Crazy Rich Asian movies that are.
But you can't write like Tarantino. No. I always tell people, like, you can't direct like Fincher. You can't direct like Nolan or Kubrick. Yep. You can be inspired.
But, absolutely.
But at the end of the day, they're going to do them much better than you could ever do it.
One of my best friends is a very, very talented writer, and he does write scripts, but he mostly writes prose. published the works, you know what I mean? And he was like, when I first started out writing, he was like, I would read a book by somebody that would really impress me, and then I would go and try to write like them. And he was like, it took me years to get something published because I wasn't writing for who I am or what I want to say. I was writing what I thought people wanted to read. And I think that it goes back to, you know what I mean? It goes back to like, don't think that you are submitting writing that somebody else absolutely wants to read. Like, don't approach it like that. If you're starting from that place, you're already making mistakes. You know what I mean? And it's going to take you a long, long time to figure out that you're making mistakes. And hopefully, like, you have a really stable job at Starbucks because you're going to need it, you know?
No, and that advice goes exactly for directors as well. Because I mean, I'd made those mistakes. I have my Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino film that I try to make that look just like theirs and try to and show everybody how, hey, look how cool I am. And it didn't work out because I wasn't using my own voice. I didn't know who I was just yet. And I know that sounds pretentious as fuck, but it's true.
It doesn't though. It doesn't, because it makes so much sense for those of us out there who actually did that, you know, who tried to write like the people that inspired us, only to find out like, okay, maybe certain elements of them work for me, but I'm not going to be successful until I find my own. And hey, writers out there, it's going to take you years to figure that out. And the only way to do it is to keep writing. And for you directors, the only way to do it is to keep directing the garbage so that you can figure out what you like to do. You know what I mean? You can figure out your inner Spielberg without having Spielberg attached to it. You know what I mean?
I mean, J.J. Abrams, who is as probably close to Spielberg as we have today, but a J.J. movie is a J.J. movie.
Yep.
There's no question. I mean, you can smell you can smell, even when he did Super 8.
I was just going to say Super 8 was like a homage.
It was literally like if Spielberg was reincarnated.
Yep.
But it still had his flavor. Absolutely. It was not a ripoff. It was not a ripoff at all. So that's why those movies are successful. Now, before we finish, because we could talk for hours. I know,
right?
And I appreciate your time. I appreciate your time, Deepthroat. So
I hope I've given you some nuggets.
You've dropped a lot of stuff. I mean, honestly, this podcast, I'm going to recommend. Anytime I meet a screenwriter, I'm like, you're going to need to listen to Deepthroat Screenwriting about the podcast. It's because you have given. I mean, a lot of the stuff I knew from being in the business, but you don't talk about it. But I definitely don't have your perspective because you walked in places I haven't walked. So it's fascinating to see the inside story about other things that I didn't have access, I didn't know about. And it's the truth. And you are completely liberated to say whatever the hell you want to say.
I know. When you told me we were just going to do it anonymous, I was like, that completely changes my approach right now. Which is so sweet because it's like, now I get to actually talk about the stuff that matters. You know what I mean? Like I get to tell these young writers or even established writers who are kind of hitting like a lull, you know what I mean? Because that happens too. Happens to me.
Happens to all of us.
I think it's super important to just understand and be reminded of what you're up against. You know what I mean? And knowing that it's a fluid process. You know what I mean? Like another thing to keep in mind too is like the turnover at these places is insane.
God,
is insane. So like you could submit a draft to an assistant who doesn't put it up, but then that assistant could go on to work at another company who then it does work, or the new assistant is hired and you can resubmit to that person. But you have to have that inside knowledge of like, okay, the turnover's happening, like, or you know, what was it like? Legendary like revamped their entire executives. You know what I mean? I had a script in there that they had passed on, and I didn't even get an acknowledgement of. The first time around, they had the turnover. My agents resubmitted it, and they were like, "Oh, let's get a meeting." You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, so like the new regime is willing to meet me, but the old regime thinks I'm garbage.
It's a lot of so much politicking, and
it is,
and it's it's a game of it's a human game of personalities and psychology. It's so more complex than what people think it is. Like, oh, you just submitted to a company and if it doesn't get in, you don't get in. No, this is a game. It's chess, basically.
Yep. And I think there are certain ways, and we talked about this already, there are certain ways to go about it that make you seem more genuine And I think that if you're more genuine, you're gonna find people that are more genuine, and then you don't have to worry about anything else. You know what I mean? Those doors are gonna be open for you. You can write a script that isn't that great, but like the genuine nature of that relationship is gonna leave that door open. You know what I mean? And that's what I feel like a lot of writers are gonna be surprised, I think, to hear, because I think even when I was coming up, I was told by people that it's like you have one shot with these people, and while there's a lot of truth to that, there's also the truth that's like, yes, with the people that you don't know, you know what I mean? But a lot of what you need to do when you come out here, and you should come out here, is like just go out and meet people and be genuine. Like be yourself. Don't be, oh, I'm the aspiring writer and I'm going to go around and like tell myself that like I'm the writer that's going to be the next big thing. It's like, no, dude, go talk to somebody about your fantasy football team. That's what's going to get you in the door.
You know what the funny thing is though, when you say that, you have to remember that it is so difficult to be yourself at every stage of growth in your life.
That's true.
And only because, you know, both you and I are in similar vintages as far as age is concerned. We take it for granted now because I am who I am. And if you don't like it, go F yourself. I just don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
But it took 20 years to get to this place in my life.
And a lot of it was the last, 10, 15 in LA?
I'm going to say the last.
To go through all of that to figure out that, okay, this is how it's done. You know what I mean?
And then
like, this is who I am.
And then the second I decided to finally just be myself, all the doors swung open.
Yep. Everything starts clicking.
Everything starts clicking the second you are yourself and you're comfortable within your own skin, which has less to do with the craft of screenwriting and more about your own personal development, but it is part of the equation.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny that you say that because one of my best friends, successful writer, really, I mean, dude, this kid's got talent out the ass, right? Like he's such a talented writer, has like a stack of scripts that I think anybody would love to buy.
Right.
But he can't sell them for the life of him because he is not personable.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's great at making his characters personable, but you put him into a pitch room and dude, the guy just shuts down. Like he's like the most dry person to like, I mean, if you could like split a bottle of whiskey over a pitch meeting, like he would be good to go. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, I feel so bad for him because like honestly, he's brought me into his pitch meetings being like, dude, I will put your name on the script if you help me pitch it. It's like, all right, where do I sign?
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's just like a lot of it has to do with like putting yourself out there and confidence level, and like those are all things that like are ancillary. You know what I mean?
Sure.
To writing, you're all safe and sound when you're in your dark room and you're typing in the glow of your computer and everything like that's all great, right? But the true reality is that this is a human business.
Yes.
You know, and you have to make human connections with people and you can't be a robot trying to sell your script and realize too that when you go out and meet these people at the bars, they're used to people being like, oh, this person only wants to talk to me because they know I can help them get something. Right.
Right.
I don't know.
We could talk for hours about this for hours.
Yeah.
Now I just
it's kind of like a question. I feel like
No, I have one more question because we were talking about this before we started recording, and I said, don't, stop. I want to put this in. You have done rewrites on some major studio tentpole things that, and I want you just to give a little bit of a glimpse behind the scenes of those studio movies, those writers, that first draft, that final draft conversation we had.
Sure. So a lot, and you'll see this a lot when you work in development, right? Where it's like, we'll have acquired the script. It's from a talented writer. You get the first draft of it. It's absolute trash. You know what I mean? And I think.
But why did they buy it? But why did they buy it? Is it because of the concept?
I mean, sometimes it's open assignment, right? So it's like the production company itself will be like, we want a movie that is about a guy that finds a girl in the trunk of his rental car. And that's the premise of the movie. That's all we've got. Come and pitch us on your take on that, right? And then. And it'll bring in like 4 or 5 writers, and one of them will be hired to write the script because they came in and they did a good pitch. You know what I mean? Like that's one way. And then they go out and they rush through the draft because they have a deadline of like 3 weeks, and I guarantee you they didn't start it until 4 days before because that's what we do, you know. And
right.
And then it's like, then who reads the first draft? It's like, first it's the development assistant. Let's get your take on it. How does the story function? We've trained you to do this. We understand that you have good notes. Like, you read it first while I read it. And then if you have a really cool boss, like, we'll compare. You know what I mean? The other side of the coin is like, okay, we've hired this writer, or we bought this script hoping that this guy would like, or this girl would be able to rewrite it. You know, we paid them for a rewrite, you know, but realize that the WGA standards have certain fees for rewriting, and in a contract you're guaranteed certain aspects. And the reality is if you don't deliver in that amount of time, they own the property, so they can go out and they've optioned the property, so they can go out and hire their own writers to rewrite your stuff per the WGA standard. If that writer then changes more than 50% of the script or something like that, and I don't know the rules, I'm sure there's probably somebody out there that's like, that's not entirely true.
Yes.
But
the
like,
concept
if you go out
is,
and make significant changes to the actual piece of property that was optioned or acquired, then your name gets put on as like a, you know, whatever. And most of my rewrites have been about like, you know, restructuring story or punching up jokes or something like that, right? Where it's like, I'll do a pass that's purely comedy based, where it's like, okay, we've got the story now, but we're struggling to find the areas of comedy. Like, we need to bring in somebody who's not as close to us to see where those opportunities lie, you know? So that's when they bring in a sort of an outside resource like myself, or like many, many other people out there who make a living off of rewriting as opposed to selling their own stuff sometimes in the lulls, right? So it's like, you go in and you'll punch up like a good bit of the jokes, or maybe like change the perspective of one character's voice, and it ends up working out, and then it goes to script, and you get to nudge your girlfriend or your wife and be like, hey, that one was mine, look, everybody's laughing at it. And you know, and it's super fun. And you get to make your car payments for a little while and buy a nice steak dinner, and that's about it. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like, and if you're Aaron Sorkin, you're brought on to do a dialogue punch up and you make $500,000. I'm not Aaron Sorkin, so I don't get that kind of rewrite cat. But at the same time, it's like, you see a wide variety of quality, quality of scripts, right? So like, if you're brought in to rewrite a second draft that the writer, you know, was hired to write their idea, it didn't pan out, they've got 2 cracks at it, and now this is you're bringing on somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes those scripts are painful to read. A lot of it, I think, is because, and I think I speak for a lot of writers that get to the level of where they're being called into these meetings, it's like, or pitching for open assignments, it's like, a lot of writers actually hate the physical act of writing. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, it's brutal.
Love to tell stories, they love to craft characters, but like, to sit down and actually do the work is like excruciating sometimes. You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially when it's somebody else's idea and not your own. You have to sometimes find the passion. And it happens a lot on TV shows, because you're all hired to write something that somebody else created. And especially if it's an early season, it's like, you're trying to figure out what the show is, and people bring in stuff that, you know, they're given a week, right? Like, you go off the script and you come back and it's like 1 week later, and it's like, now we have to spend the next month punching this script up as a group. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how it works. And to the level of quality that you see from like these professional writers with big names submit these drafts, and when you're brought in as a rewriter to do it, the quality is variable. Sometimes it's a really great script and you're like, God, I can't believe that they weren't on board with this. Like, this is a great take. But again, you got to think about their mandate, where they're going, where they want to go, what they expect to see, who maybe they have somebody attached who doesn't like it. You know what I mean? There are a lot of auxiliary issues that could be there. Whereas if you're just brought on to the scripting phase with no attachments, and this is just an open assignment that they wanted, and you come in and it's like, you can tell that this writer put together a pitch like 48 hours before they got the meeting, and it's like, okay, you can tell that in the script, because they didn't really they may have had the hour-long pitch thought out, but they didn't have the actual story fleshed out. And now that they were given, like, you know, 2 or 3 months or 6 months or 30 days, whatever it was, to write the script, you can tell that it suffered. You know what I mean? Right. Because it's even hard for us professional writers to go in and be like, okay, I completely understand what this is. Like, it's a process for us too, you know? And I think that, again, a lot of these young writers probably don't understand that that's the case. They're like, oh, I'm going to sell my script to this production company, and it's going to go straight to principal photography, and it's going to go straight to theaters. It's going to have my name on it, and it's going to be exactly how I did it. And you have to be out of your mind if you think that's going to be exactly how it works. Like, you're going to sell the script. You may, if you're lucky, get a crack at the rewrite. If not, they're going to bring in somebody who is an Aaron Sorkin or is an XYZ, that they can afford and that fits with the genre or whatever. And they're going to do the punch ups. If they rewrite more than you, they're going to be the ones that get the credit. You may be lucky enough to get a producer credit or a story by if it's in your contract, if you had a good manager, an agent, whatever, right? And then at the end of the day, you may go to the theater to watch the movie that you set out to write and it be completely different than your pitch that actually got you the job in the first place. But that's how it works. It's like when you make a product it's like Apple updates. Like, you get a new Apple update every 3 days. You know what I mean? Like, they're Apple updating scripts every 3 days. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that as rewriters, as writers in general, like, understanding that that's the name of the game is critical. And I've seen some, let's say this, I've seen some scripts that will never ever see the light of day because they were good, and I've seen really bad scripts get made because of those auxiliary factors. You know what I mean?
An actor wants to do it. That's the end of it.
Yep. Whether or not the original writer who pitched it is good, and and a lot of it's done in house. If you get hired by a management / production company, they have a team of writers and a team of directors and a team of actors. Like, they have all of that stuff in house so that they can go and then package it and then sell it. You know what I mean?
Right.
As a package, which is a lot of how movies get sold these days.
At the big studio stuff, yeah, without question.
Yeah, and it's like, if you have a shitty draft that Matt Damon is like, yeah, I'll do that movie. That sounds like a cool movie. I'll do it. Like, let me read the script. And then you get like an attachment letter and there's a big PR release and like it's in Variety and all this stuff. Matt Damon signs on to blah, blah, blah. That movie could never get made, sure, but it's going to end up in the trades because they want to generate buzz and they want to keep the momentum flowing. But honestly, it all comes back to, is the script going to function? Is the script going to be good? Is this going to be ready? You can have all the elements attached in the world, and even then, Guillermo del Toro will tell you doesn't mean it's going to, or Terry Gilliam, is going to be like, okay, I've had, Don Quixote and turnaround for 25 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, that's what happens.
It's exactly what happens. All right, man, you've been so freaking amazing, Deepthroat, that Deepthroat, that you've dropped some major knowledge bombs on the tribe, man. So thank you so much. I have a few questions I ask all of my guests, so it's kind of rapid fire. What advice would you give a screenwriter wanting to break into the business today?
Cross your fingers.
It's very, very uplifting. It's extremely uplifting, sir. Thank you. Can you tell me what book had the biggest impact on your life or career?
Harry Potter.
Okay. What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
That's a great question. I would say being genuine and owning who I am as opposed to what I think other people want me to be.
Oh God, that's a great lesson to learn. It's amazing.
It applies to both business and life, man. I'm telling you.
Absolutely. Now, what are 3 of your favorite films of all time?
3 of my favorite films of all time. Okay. Off the top of my head, I would say Braveheart.
Okay. Excellent film.
The movie Network.
Another amazing, both very well written.
Yep. And Lord of War. I love Lord of War.
Really? You like Lord of War?
I know. I wanted to throw you a curveball, something that like maybe wasn't,
really Lord of War.
But I love that movie. I mean, say what you want about the story and the writing, and my wife hates the ending. But like, I love that movie so much. I love how it starts. I love how it finishes. I love the character. I can't take my eyes off of him. I love the midpoint reversal.
Well, the best part of that movie,
I love that stuff.
For me, the best part of that movie was the opening title sequence.
Right? I love
that opening title sequence.
It's so good, and it's like, for those, I'm not going to ruin anything for those who haven't seen. No spoiler alerts here, right? Because go out and watch it. I think it's awesome. And say what you want about the writing, and say what you want about the characters. Like, that movie kept me entertained. I cared about whether or not. And I love like movies where it's like there's an anti-hero. You know what I mean? Like I'm rooting for the guy who's the bad guy. You know what I mean? I love that. And that was like one of the first times where and I could have said The Matrix, and I could have said Jurassic Park, and I mean the first movie I ever watched in my real life, right. in my life first movie I ever saw was Land Before Time.
Genius film.
My mom took me. It was the first movie I ever saw in the theater, and I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God, movies are great. And I've been obsessed ever since. And Harry Potter was what convinced me that I wanted to write. Matrix changed my entire perspective of the world and of filmmaking.
Yes.
But my favorite movies are Braveheart, Network, and Lord of War, because I wanted to put something in that you probably haven't heard before.
That's never been on the show on any of my podcasts. That's never been on the show. So you
like at this point, they're probably gonna be like, I wasted an hour and a half listening to this dude and his favorite movie is Lord of War.
This guy knows nothing. But then again, because we don't know who you are, it doesn't matter. So you could be free.
Maybe I wrote Lord of War. No,
maybe you did. You don't know.
I did. I definitely didn't. It was Andrew Niccol, I think.
Yes, it was. It was. Now this is the part of the show where I generally ask where we can find you, but you will now go back into the darkness of the parking
shadows. Maybe in a future episode you can drop my name as being like, oh, if you guys are looking for somebody who can help you develop your script, check this guy out, and it'll just never know who it was.
Maybe we could do something like that if you like. But now you can go back into the shadows of the parking garage, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, man, so much for being so candid and really, I think we hopefully helped a lot of people listening, because there was some great practical industry advice in this without question. And you didn't expose yourself too much, sir.
No, I mean we only had to edit out one part. So
just one part. That's it. Thanks again, man.
Just a little seed there for the people listening to be like, oh, I wonder what that was.
Exactly. Thank you for your time.
Man, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
As promised, Deepthroat brought the mega knowledge bombs this episode, and I want to thank Deepthroat for coming on and just being so candid and sharing so much about his experience, his behind-the-scenes point of view of being a script reader, being a development executive, and all the juicy details and morsels that he gave us in this episode. I really hope you guys got something out of it. I know I did. There's a ton of stuff that I had no idea about, and I'm really grateful that he was able to come on and share his knowledge with you guys. So this is a point of the episode where I say, if you want to go to the show notes and get links to everything we talked about, just head over to indiefilmhustle.com/BPS024, but there will be no links to him because obviously he is Deepthroat. He is now back living in a parking garage somewhere in the shadows, reading a script or writing one, I'm sure. Now, if you want to get Deepthroat to actually read one of your scripts, you can submit your screenplays to the Bulletproof Script Coverage Service at covermyscreenplay.com. Thank you for listening, guys. And truly, if you found this episode informative and it helped you in any way, please share this episode with as many friends, screenwriters, filmmakers as you know. I want this information out there to help as many people as possible. So please share. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, please head over to screenwritingpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. And as always, keep on writing no matter what. I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Bulletproof Screenplay podcast at bulletproofscreenplay.com. That's BULLETPROOFSCREENPLAY.com.